My name is Rich Hua, and today I'll be talking about the topic of emotional intelligence can supercharge your innovation, also known as the innovator's mindset. So this is a little bit of a different talk than you probably heard in most innovation-type sessions. We're going to talk not just about the IQ part, but the EQ, or emotional intelligence part. You know, innovation has been found by research to not just be a cognitive process, but it's also very much an emotional one. In fact, studies have found that things like grit, determination, and fearlessness have just as much to do, and sometimes even more than intellect when it comes to being innovative. So this talk is going to be about the emotional side, maybe the first one you've ever heard on this particular topic, but I do hope it can add some value as you're striving to innovate in the realm that you are in. So my name is Rich Hua, and I work at AWS, and I serve as the worldwide head of our Epic Leadership Program. And I'm also the founder of the EQ at Amazon community and also an innovation evangelist. Now, you may be wondering what EPIC means. It's actually an acronym, and it stands for an effort to up-level the emotional and social intelligence of Amazonian leaders so that they can lead with greater empathy, purpose, inspiration, and connection. It is built on top of the Amazon community of emotional intelligence enthusiasts, which now number over 50,000 people across all parts of Amazon. So our team has had the privilege of delivering talks like this to hundreds of thousands of Amazonians, as well as to over 15,000 customers, and I'm really excited to be able to share this with you today as well. So our goal is to raise the collective emotional intelligence of 1.5 million people at Amazon, and then hopefully 1 billion people in the world at large. So before I jump in, I wanted to talk about a friend of mine who is actually an inspiration for me in terms of why I got into the realm of emotional intelligence. So this friend was born in Taiwan and then moved to the United States when he was about 3.5 years old. And he had a lot of challenges and things going against him. He was very awkward socially, had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, didn't speak English, and faced bullying, racism, and had a whole lot of really negative experiences as he was growing up in the Midwest of the United States. And so he decided to basically get rid of all his emotions and focus just on the IQ side. Well, he figured out he's actually pretty smart, and so he thought, well, hey, let's be a genius robot. That's the goal in life. And did really well in school, got straight A's, got a perfect score on the SAT, got into every college he applied to, and of course studied electrical engineering and computer science at Berkeley. Everything was going great until he did one thing that completely messed up his plans, and it's called he got married. And then instead of going into engineering, he actually decided to do something completely human-oriented. He became a missionary in the Far East. And so for both professional and personal reasons, he realized that he needed to develop his emotion skills and his empathy. So he got to work, read tons of books, got a lot of mentoring and coaching, took a bunch of courses, dramatically increasing those skills, and sure enough found out that they actually contributed to success more than even the IQ part. To the point that he started coaching C-level executives, people who are brand new managers, people who are new to the workforce, and wound up helping hundreds of thousands of people increase in those skills, and it wound up being the secret to his success and the success of many other people that he's helped out. So I have a confession to make. That story isn't actually about a friend of mine. It's actually my story. So this is me growing up in Illinois, Downers Grove, southwest suburb, and an awkward little kid, and this is me on my wedding day, almost 35 years ago, my amazing wife who has inspired me to develop my emotion skills. And then here's a picture of me with my adult children at the Ponte Vecchio in Italy. I have perhaps the greatest privilege or benefit a father could possibly have from his children, and that is that they actually laugh at my jokes. And the other thing I do is, when I'm not doing emotional intelligence, I practice a Korean martial art called Hapkido. And I like to say that in my interpersonal interactions, I always try to use EQ first, but if that doesn't work, I can always punch you in the face. So have not had to do that ever, at least in the professional world, so EQ has definitely worked out so far. All right, so we're going to jump into how emotional intelligence can actually help you innovate and succeed in life. So we're going to talk about the neuroscience of innovation, how to boost your personal innovation, and also how to build an innovative organization, finally get some resources to continue your EQ journey going forward, which I hope all of you will. All right, so innovation is something different that creates value. Based on HBR studies, there's a myth that every innovation has to be galactic and sort of groundbreaking. Yes, we need those. But what if everyone at your company actually innovated all the time? And that if we had actually 100 small improvements throughout the year, research has actually found that that can be even more powerful than one giant one on an annual basis. Because it does so many things, it delights customers, improves things, can really make a dramatic difference, even though you can't count every single one on its own. And so we have a leadership principle at Amazon called invent and simplify, because we believe that innovation is not only inventing breathtaking new things, it also means simplifying things and making them easier to use and better for customers. So the neuroscience of innovation is really quite fascinating. We talk a lot about intelligence, IQ, and those skills, but the emotional side is quite powerful because emotions impact almost everything we do. Dr. Mark Brackett, who's the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, has found that our emotions impact all 5 of the things you see here on the screen. Your ability to pay attention, your decision making, your performance and creativity, all your relationships, and yes, your physical and mental health. Now, how many of us would be willing to remove one of these skills from our work day as we're trying to be successful? Right? None of them, because they're all really important, every single one. Now, I have a little sort of a poll. I'd like you to ask you to raise your hand if you think the percentage of the day that we experience emotions, all right? So how many of us think it's between 0 and 25% of the day we experience emotions? All right. Okay, I got one hand raised, a couple hands. How many of us think it's between 25 and 50% of the day we experience emotions? Okay, I got a few more. How many of us think it's between 50 and 75%? All right, I got about a third of the audience. How many of us think it's 90% or actually between 75 and 100%? All right, got a lot of raised hands. Okay, obviously you're a smart group, you get it. Actually, the research has found that it's between 90 and 100% of your day. Almost every team meeting, almost every one-on-one, even while you're sitting there coding, you're experiencing some kind of emotion, and it absolutely affects all of these. There's a really fascinating study done by Dr. Brackett. He basically had 2 groups of teachers grade the exact same essay. But what he did was he had one group think about a negative classroom experience before grading, and of course they were in a bad mood when they gave the grade. And he had the other half think about a positive classroom experience, and they were in a good mood when they gave the grade. And guess what the results were? The ones in a good mood gave a full grade or 2 higher than the ones in a bad mood. And when they were asked, do you think your mood had anything to do with the grade you gave, 87% said, absolutely not, I was completely objective. So imagine trying to have a conversation with a customer, trying to convince your team of something, trying to have a conversation about your salary in a good mood or a bad mood. It absolutely affects your decision making and your creative skills. Did you also know that, fascinating, there's actually a really bad time to appear before a judge? Just a little extra tip here. If you ever have a speeding ticket or commit a felony, which I hope you don't, but if you have to go before a judge, the absolute worst time is guess when? No, actually, it's between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. because they are hungry, or also known as hangry. So research has actually found that that is the worst time. So if you actually do need to appear before a judge, try to go right after breakfast or right after lunch. You'll get a better outcome. So the fact is, our emotions affect so much of what we do. And the neuroscience is that there's one big thing that can block our creativity. And it's right here. It's stress. When we're too stressed out, it is hard to be innovative or creative. And, I've shown pictures like this across Amazon, and people have actually, during the pandemic, used this as sort of their actual photo because they thought, this is how I look when I, get up and look in the mirror in the mornings. It's been a stressful time. And one of the keys to innovation from an emotional perspective is to know what to do with that stress. So there's some research that's shown that when stimuli come into our brain, it enters through the base and goes first into the lizard brain, which is the oldest part of our brain, also known as the amygdala. And what happens is when it goes there, it detects threats. You basically figure out, is there danger? You feel emotions. You have that fight or flight or freeze response. Cortisol might go to your body if you actually do detect a threat. And then it moseys on over to the prefrontal cortex, where you have the filtering, judgment, and creativity. Now, what can happen is if that stimulus is really, really strong, your amygdala takes over your brain and it hijacks it, and you are offline with the front part of your brain. And so imagine you're driving on the freeway and a car cuts you off, or your manager says, hey, come into my office, we need to talk. Or you're sitting in a meeting and you give an idea and somebody says, well, that's a really stupid idea, that will never work. Basically, your amygdala fires off, and that can really hurt the creative process that we can generally have. So it's great for survival, but it's not great for creativity. So there's a model that Yerkes and Dotson came up with, and it basically contrasts your stress level and your ability to be able to perform and do things that are cognitive or creative. And so it's called the Yerkes-Dotson model, and so what you want to do is you don't want to be either too low or too high. You actually want to be in the sweet spot. So stressors come, it activates our bodily systems and tells us something important is about to happen. And it turns out that stress has a direct effect on performance. So if you actually have too little stress, you're in the bored zone and you might look like this. Have you felt that lately at work? Probably not, actually, but maybe. But if you have too much stress, you actually wind up being the wacky zone and you look like this. And neither of those allows you to be innovative, creative in the way that you'd want to be. What you want to actually be is in that middle zone where you can actually have great cognitive function. So it's the high performance zone. Some people call it the flow zone or maybe relaxed intensity. But what we want to do is when we are too high or too low, get ourselves into that middle part. So at Amazon, our culture of innovation, if you've had the chance to listen to one of our culture of innovation talks, you know that it's really based on the leadership principles. And we have things like mechanisms and organization and different things that help facilitate it, but really it's all founded on this idea of the underpinning of our LPs, or leadership principles. And it's how we operate, from how we hire to make decisions to try to operate on a regular basis. And what a lot of people don't actually know is that emotions are a big part of our leadership principles and that what helps us be innovative. I mean, just look at some of the words that are here. Listen attentively, speak candidly, treat others respectfully, be vocally self-critical, awkward, embarrassing, respectfully challenge, uncomfortable, exhausting, tenacious. They rise to the occasion. They're willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. And of course, the foundational one, customer obsession, we earn and keep customer trust. How could you possibly put these into practice without the emotional side as well as the IQ side? And so it all begins with this idea of when we have the foundation of customer obsession, we build these other things on top of it, and we need to be able to harness our emotions as well as the IQ. And that is actually what emotional intelligence is. It's knowing how to use emotions and have them work for you rather than against you. All right, so let's talk now about how to boost our personal innovation. And as we've delivered this across Amazon, one of the most powerful things we've realized is that, identifying our emotions is not something that we're really taught in school. You can literally have a PhD in data science and never have taken a single course on emotion skills, social skills, and yet the research has found that emotions have so much to do with our success, in some cases even more than the IQ part. So emotional agility is this idea that we can understand, what am I feeling and do I want to stay or shift? Maybe you're anxious or critical. Might not be great for a brainstorming session for new ideas, but might actually be really great if you're trying to look at dense data and figure out what mistakes are there. On the other hand, perhaps you're cheery, really happy. Might be great for a team meeting that you're trying to kick off, but may not be helpful if you're trying to comfort a friend who just suffered a loss. So the point is finding the right emotion for the right situation so we can actually achieve the goals that we want to achieve. It depends. So here's a interesting sort of facial list of emotions. And the first question that I asked is, what am I feeling? Right? It's really the foundation of emotional intelligence. What is the emotion that I'm experiencing right now? So for instance, try to name the emotion you're experiencing right now. Like, what are you feeling? Hopefully you're not bored. If you are, then, I'm going to be really offended. But, hopefully you're excited or curious or wondering or skeptical. Those are totally fine. What's the emotional state, right? And as I mentioned, there's two reasons why identifying it is so hard. One is very few of us ever get taught these skills. And two is we're highly adaptable. which means that we can actually acclimate to a massive amount of stress in our lives without realizing that we're actually under a lot of stress. You can be in the wacky zone and not even be able to identify that's where you are. Have you ever gone on vacation and then got sick the first day? Anybody ever had that experience? Why does that happen? It happens actually very often. It's because we're under this incredibly high stress load, and suddenly we go on vacation, and then we let down, and then we get sick. And it's because we didn't even realize that we're under this incredible stress load. We just kind of adapted to it. And so those are two reasons why it's really important to understand what is our emotional state for both our health and also just our performance. So let's look at some common emotions and how they affect our innovation. All right? So take a look at this one right here. And I'm going to show you a few of them. And see if you can identify what it is. When you see the face, go ahead and just kind of yell out, what emotion do you think that is? Okay, here's this one. Yeah, surprise. Okay, that's pretty good. Surprise or shock. All right, not great for innovation. How about this one? Disgusted. It could be. Yeah, or defensive, right? Something, it's like, okay, hey, get that out of my face. How about this one? That's easy. Anger, furious, right? None of these three would be really great for an innovation session with your team, all right? If somebody came with that attitude, probably not going to come up with some fantastic ideas. On the other hand, look at these three. How about this one? Yeah, curious, a little bit thoughtful, pensive, right? Something like that. Here's another one. Yeah, concentrating, intense, all right? And then here's a good one. That's one we want more at work, right? Optimistic, happy, receptive. So as you can obviously intuit, the first three are not going to be fantastic for innovation, whereas the last three are going to be more conducive for it. So where do we start to identify emotions? In a place that you may not normally think of, and that's your body. So it turns out that when we have emotions, our body actually reacts before we're even aware of it. So this is a really fascinating chart that when you kind of feel parts of your body get hot or cold, that actually tells you something is going on. So for instance, when you're angry on the left, all right, you get hot in the face, your cheeks get hot, you have pressure in your chest, your heart may start pounding, and when that happens, you go, okay, I'm actually experiencing anger right now. Or fear. When you experience fear, your stomach gets tight, your palms get sweaty, your face gets tense, maybe your throat tightens, so that tells you, okay, I'm afraid. Here's a fascinating one, contempt, right? Your face is hot, but the rest of your body is cold. So if you can actually learn the signals that your body is telling you, you can go, okay, this is something going on right now. Do I want to stay with it, or do I want to shift? And that's why things like paying attention, being mindful can make such a big difference, right? If we're going into a one-on-one or having a team meeting and our face is hot and our chest is pounding, we may want to go, okay, what is the state I'm in? Is this going to be helpful for what I'm trying to accomplish? Now, I'm going to show you something that's a little nerdy, but I'm a nerd, so I love this. It's actually a way of being able to learn how to increase your emotions. So here's a fascinating thing. Do you know what the average number of emotions a person can name is? According to Brené Brown, it's 3. Okay, it's happy, sad, and some form of pissed off. Okay, so those are the 3 emotions that most of us can name. And yet, the research has found that if you can name more, you're healthier, you're happier, you go to the doctor less during your lifetime, and you spend fewer days in the hospital. And by the way, you're also less prone to alcoholism and violent behavior. So there's a lot of really good reasons to increase our emotional vocabulary. So Dr. Mark Brackett came up with this thing called the mood meter. And what he does is he says, if you want to increase your vocabulary, you can literally triple it like today before walking out of here. And the way you do it is you basically pick a number from 1 to 10 on how pleasant you feel right now. Okay, 1 would be totally unpleasant, 10 would be super pleasant, 5 would be right in the middle. Okay, pick a number. Got it? How pleasant do you feel? Scale of 1 to 10. Then you pick a number of how energetic do you feel from 1 to 10. Again, low of 1, high of 10, 5 in the middle. Got it? So you got a pleasantness, you have an energy, and you plot it on this like a Cartesian coordinate, and then you find your relative emotion. All right, so go take a look. What emotion are you experiencing right now? Some of you are laughing, some of you are surprised. All right, so the fact is, again, it's kind of a nerdy way of doing it, but I wish I had this when I was a kid. It would have actually helped me. So there's some interesting ones, right? Like proud, energized, frightened, miserable, sullen, right? These words actually help us identify. And here's the interesting thing. There's not necessarily a good or a bad emotion. It depends on what we're trying to accomplish. For instance, anger might actually spur you on to action, right? You want to fight for justice. Disappointment might actually make you do something differently next time because you're like, you know what, I don't like that feeling. So it's not necessarily bad, it's just how do we leverage it. Negative or unpleasant emotions can actually be really good for taking quick, specific action, right? If I'm running for my life from somebody chasing me, fear is really helpful for that. However, when you're trying to solve bigger, ambiguous problems like innovate on the job, it's better for open-mindedness and creativity and things like hope to have more positive emotions. So here's the key. There's not necessarily a good or bad, but we do want to stay out of the super low energy and the super low pleasantness. Okay, so if you're in that really left super low pleasantness side, you probably don't want to be there. And you also don't want to be in the super low energy side. So, when you have that L, basically that stands for a lack of innovation, okay? So we don't want to be in, morose, despondent, fuming, or panic. Those things don't necessarily help us be more innovative. So one little tip that's really fascinating is if you can name the emotion, you can actually go a long way to taming it. Just saying, I am experiencing anger, or I am experiencing disappointment, or I'm frightened actually helps you have more control and it doesn't take you over. So remember that study I mentioned earlier where they had the two groups of teachers basically grading the same essay? Well, what they did was they repeated the study, and the second time they told the teachers, identify what emotional state you're in. So the ones in a bad mood said, I'm disappointed, I'm sad, I'm angry. The ones in a good mood said, I'm happy, I'm excited. And guess what the results were when they graded the essay? They gave the same grade. Because even though they were feeling negative or positive, by identifying the emotion, it helped neutralize the negative or detrimental effects of, the bias that might be there. All right, so I'm going to give you now 3 really simple tips that can help us get out of a state we don't want to be in, especially if we're in the wacky zone and we're really stressed out. Now, this is for innovation, but can also, be helpful if you have some kind of serious issue going on at work, or, something went awry, or, your project didn't go the way you wanted, or you got really disappointed, or your teenager comes home and says something you don't like. I mean, it can work basically in any situation. And there are 3 simple things that are quite powerful. The first, to reduce your stress, is to move your body, right? If we actually just get up and start moving around, it helps our body be able to regulate our stress response. So, working from home is great in many ways, but one of the things we wind up doing a lot of is sitting on our can, right? And so there's been studies that found that if you sit more than 11 hours a day, which if you work at, 8, 9 hour day and then eat dinner and watch some, TV, that's more than 11 hours. If you do that, you have a 50% greater chance of dying in the next 3 years. Okay, so we don't want to just sit around, but the way to actually counteract that is move around for 60 to 90 minutes a day. So if we are sitting a lot, make sure that we're getting up and we're moving. And one of the super boosters is go outside, and that produces some oxytocin that actually helps elevate your mood as well. So moving around is a great way. So if you're feeling stressed, instead of pounding out another email, get up, do some yoga, some push-ups, run outside around your house, do something that actually can help regulate the stress response. Okay, don't do that in the middle of a team meeting, though. That might be a little weird if you kind of get up and kind of run outside. But, the fact is, really moving your body can make a difference. So the second thing, connecting with friends, right? When we actually are stressed out and we spend time with people, they help co-regulate that stress. They help attenuate it. They bring it down. Studies have found that it actually reduces the cortisol in your body when you spend time with people that you have pleasant relationships with, family, friends, colleagues you care about. And, one of the great boosters when you do that is if you can actually laugh together. So when you laugh together, it produces endorphins, and that was one of the greatest ways to reduce stress. And how many times children actually laugh? 400 times a day. You know how many times the average adult laughs? Any guesses? 5, 3, 10. All right, so the average across all adults is like 15. All right, so when we're younger, we laugh almost all the time because we think life is pretty funny and there are a lot of funny things. But then we get really, really serious when we grow up and we don't laugh nearly as much. And so we're not producing as many endorphins. And those things help us to reduce stress and help us also be more creative and also earns trust as we build relationships. So the third thing is breathing mindfully. This is one of the most popular techniques that we've taught across Amazon because it's so incredibly simple to do. And basically what it means is you take some time and you take some deep breaths, and that actually helps regulate your stress response. So mindful breathing is used by C-level executives, Olympic athletes, people in the military, to be able to manage their stress when it's really, really high, and it's helped them perform at higher levels. Because when you actually do this, you produce oxytocin. And oxytocin is a beautiful hormone. It helps you be more empathetic. It reduces your stress levels. It helps you think more clearly and focus. You get it when you give someone a big hug. You get it when you listen to calming music, when you take a walk out in nature, when you have a baby, when you have sex. All those things produce oxytocin. Some of those are easier to do during the workday than others. However, there's something you can do any moment that creates more oxytocin, and that is by breathing mindfully. So I'm going to actually ask you to do something maybe you've never done before at work, and that is to do a breathing exercise with me. It's the one used by the Navy SEALs, and basically it's called box breathing. You breathe in for a 4 count, you hold it for a 4 count, you breathe out for a 4 count, and you keep it out for a 4 count, and by doing that for about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, you actually lower the cortisol levels in your body, reduce your heart rate and blood pressure. So it's actually quite powerful. Okay, now don't take my word for it. We're going to do this together, okay? So humor me for 2 minutes of your life, okay? If you don't like it, don't ever do it again. Say this guy's a quack, but you may actually wind up enjoying it, okay? So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and sort of sit up straight, comfortably in your chair. Put your hands, wherever's comfortable. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Take a nice big breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, just sort of a cleansing breath. Okay, now we're going to do the box breath, okay? In through the nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it, 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through the mouth, 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it out, 1, 2, 3, 4. In through the nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now do it on your own for a few cycles or whatever rhythm or cadence makes the most sense. I encourage you to really try to fill those lungs on the way in. Really feel those lungs expand. And then on the way out with your exhale, really let those lungs contract. Get all that carbon dioxide out of your body. Actually feels really pleasant to do that. You can savor that. Okay, one final cycle of a box breath now with me. Just kind of do it on your own. Okay, open your eyes. How'd that feel? Just yell it out. Great, good, relaxing. Okay, you in the second row, wake up. Okay, yeah, it actually can happen where people fall asleep. It probably means you're a little sleep deprived. But the fact is, believe it or not, you just created some oxytocin and you activated your parasympathetic nervous system, which decreases the intensity of really, really intense emotions like anger or fear and stress, and also down-regulates your heart rate and your blood pressure. That's why the Navy SEALs use it. So it's not just in your mind, something actually really does happen. And the other thing that you did was you brought more oxygen into your body. Our brain is about 3% of our body mass, but uses like 20 to 30% of our oxygen, and we're generally shallow breathers. Like we almost never get a full breath unless we're like working out. So when you do that, you're actually oxygenating your brain, which makes you function at a higher level. And anybody basically had some maybe difficulty falling asleep? You had some, sort of sleep challenges during the pandemic or last few months, right? Okay, got a lot of hands raised. So if you do this while you're in bed or before going to sleep, this actually helps you fall asleep. So it can be really, really helpful for that. All right, so I'm going to give you another technique that's quite powerful for also regulating our emotions. It's called reframing. Okay, this is the foundation of cognitive behavioral science. And Dr. James Gross over at Stanford has done a ton of really fantastic research on this idea. And pretty much the idea is that if you can actually activate your prefrontal cortex and look at things in a different way, you can manage your emotions a lot more effectively, right? And there's a study they did with a whole bunch of people who were basically cleaning people at a hotel. Okay, they're mostly women, and so they were cleaning hotel rooms. And what they found out was that during the course of a day of cleaning, they're actually doing the recommended daily amount of exercise that the Surgeon General says you should do. And so what they did was they took a group of those women, they said, hey, guess what? You're actually exercising while you're doing your job. And the other half, they basically just let them do their job. And after 2 months, by reframing their job as exercise with no other intervention, guess what the results were? Those women lost an average of 2 pounds and lowered their blood pressure by 10 points because of reframing. It is incredibly powerful. So what are some ways we can reframe when things are really challenging? The first is reinterpret. And that means being able to look at things from a different perspective without the threat in it. Okay, instead of saying things like, I'm a dumb, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, we can use one of the great quotes from Carol Dweck, who wrote a fantastic book called Mindset. She says, I'm not good at this yet. And if we can have that growth mindset, reframing it, it can really make a difference. The other is basically just getting comfortable with the fact that we're going to fail. It doesn't mean we're a failure. It means that things are going to go awry. It's an experiment, and it's not always going to work out. Now, one really powerful thing in relationships with other people is basically reinterpreting what other people do with positive frame, assuming positive intent. Instead of basically assuming people out to get you, if we can look at other people and go, hey, they were trying to, they didn't know what they were doing or they didn't mean it, can actually really help our relationships. Again, a great example is, ever been cut off on the freeway and you really wanted to do something not so helpful? Okay, we've all done that, right? You're caught off on the freeway. I mean, okay, you can, what a jerk, they try to kill me. You might do things like, honk your horn at them, tail them, make gestures with your fingers, run them off the road. There are a lot of things you can do, none of which would be really helpful. On the other hand, if you reinterpret it and said, wow, that was kind of scary, maybe they're on the way to the hospital because a loved one's actually really ill and they didn't even realize what they did. See how different that feels? It's a really, really powerful technique. So the second is repositioning. That means considering something from a different point of view. One of the most powerful ways to reposition that helps us with our determination and our grit and our resilience is asking ourselves, what could I possibly be grateful for even in this situation? How can this make me better? How many of us have gone through a painful or challenging situation at work sometime in the last year? Right? It's like every single one of us. Right now, you can either go, well, that's terrible, that sucks, and I hate the world, which you may feel that, and that's legit. And you can also follow up by saying, okay, that was painful, I didn't like it, but how could this possibly make me better? And they did research with the US Army where they actually taught them those skills. And instead of just looking at training or missions as painful or tough, they said, how can this make me a better soldier, better leader, better person? And that dramatically improved their success rates, and it became this thing called master resilience training. So very powerful for grit resilience, which of course is very needed for innovation. The third type is reordering, which essentially just means, how important is this really? Have you ever gotten an email where you're like, I am so mad, I cannot believe they sent this email, and you basically flamed them back, and that always worked out really well, right? The fact is, we get so discombobulated about things, but if we just took a step back for 1 minute and said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important really is this to me? We're going to make a lot better decision and manage our emotions better. One of the techniques I use is I call it the 10-10-10 method. Essentially, I ask myself, will I care about this in 10 days, 10 weeks, or 10 months? I may not actually care about this in 10 minutes, so why am I spending all this energy on it? That can actually help us be able to regulate ourselves better. And finally, it's normalizing. The fact is, it's realizing that whatever we're going through, other people are experiencing it too. You know, it's okay that I'm down. It's okay I'm having a bad day, because after all, I actually am a human being, not an automaton. You know, we were having this senior VP at Amazon come to one of our events, and it was really quite profound. Somebody asked him, what's the best career advice that that you'd share with people? That he'd been at Amazon over 20 years, really successful. And you know what he said? He said, you know, it's okay to be down for a time. You're not always going to be successful and be on the top of your game. Now, how profound. That the thing he said was not that you're always going to deliver, but that you need to basically have some self-compassion and realize that even top performers have tough days or tough weeks or sometimes tough months, because that's just life. So if we can actually leverage these can help us be able to manage our stress response and our emotions more effectively. All right, so now I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip, but first a quote from Dr. Daniel Goleman. You don't have to believe your thoughts. You know, I think it's actually quite profound. Just because you think it doesn't mean you actually have to go along with it. All right, I have a little poll now for us. And go ahead and raise your hand if you sleep an average of 7 or more hours a night. Okay, I got about maybe 60%, 50%. All right, how about 6 to 7 hours a night? Okay, that was actually more. Okay, some of you raised your hand twice, or all right, okay, that looked like about 2/3. How about less than 6 hours? Okay, got a few. All right, how about sleep? What is sleep? Anybody in that situation? Okay, so here's the good news and the bad news. The good news, if you sleep more than 7 hours a night, that's great for your brain. The bad news is if you sleep less than 7 hours a night, this is basically what you look like in your brain. Dr. Matt Walker, who's one of the foremost researchers on sleep over at UC Berkeley, he's found that when you don't sleep enough, which for the average person is about 7 hours, 7 to 8, you have 60% greater activity in the emotional part of your brain, which is the amygdala. You ever broken down emotionally, or just kind of reacted in a way that you what is going on? Or maybe had somebody say, oh, I'm sorry, I just didn't get enough sleep. And you're like, oh, that's a big excuse. It's not an excuse, it's actually true. You are 60% more emotional and less able to manage it if you don't get enough sleep. And did you know that you also look at other people as more threatening when you don't get enough sleep? That a neutral facial expression actually looks more like they're angry at you. So those are things that are not going to be helpful for our relationships or our innovation. And by the way, you also lower your immune response and have a greater chance of heart attack. Actually, 3 times greater chance of a heart attack or stroke once you get past middle age. So there's a lot of great reasons to get more sleep, so that instead of looking like this, you can look like this. So one of the most beautiful things about working from home is you can do a little bit of a hack. If you don't get enough sleep, you can do this thing called take a nap. And the ideal nap is somewhere in the afternoon, about 2:30, 3 o'clock when you're tired. It's about 25 minutes. And Dan Pink wrote about this thing called the Nappuccino. So what you do is you drink a cup of coffee. It takes about 20 minutes for the caffeine to get in your bloodstream. That's about the extent of your nap, so you wake up ready to go. I've had quite a few Nappuccinos. It's made me the man that I am today. So anyway, it can help. All jokes aside, it is not a substitute for sleep, but if you do need some extra sleep, it can help. All right, so those are things that help boost our personal innovation. Let's now talk about how to build an innovative organization. So there's some really interesting research that came out of Google a few years ago, and they called it Project Aristotle. And they were basically looking at the highest performing teams compared to the lowest performing teams. And what they found was fascinating. Okay, they thought it'd be the smartest people, the right functional fit, team dynamics, from a sort of intellectual sort of capacity, but it wasn't any of those things. The number one most important thing was this thing that they identified as psychological safety. And it was the foundation for the other things you see there on the screen: dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. And this comes out of research from Amy Edmondson over at Harvard, where she says that it is a team climate characterized by interpersonal trust, mutual respect, in which people are comfortable being themselves. It's a shared belief held by members of the team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So what they found was that it's a team where people can say things like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some help. hey, you're better at this than I am. Or, hey, I have a different point of view from what everyone else thinks. Or, hey, I'm just having a hard time. That when people can actually say those things, it makes the team a lot more high-performing and also more creative. Basically, you can voice your ideas, your questions, and your concerns. So, Adam Grant, who is a really well-known Wharton professor, best-selling author, he basically has this really nice chart of the psychologically safe or fearless organization and the not safe or the anxious organization, right? So when you have it, you see mistakes as opportunities to learn. When you don't, they're threats to your career. When you have it, you're willing to take risks and fail. When you don't, you're unwilling to rock the boat. When you have it, you speak your mind in meetings. When you don't, you keep your ideas to yourself. When you have it, you openly share your struggles. When you don't, you only tout your strengths. When you have it, you trust your teammates and managers. When you don't, you fear those same people. And when you have it, you stick your neck out. When you don't, you have it chopped off. So, on the left is the fearless organization, and on the right is the anxious organization. I see several of you laughing here. So here's the thing. Which one describes your team or organization more? Is it more on the left side or the right side? The left side is going to be a lot more innovative. In extreme cases, being on the left side, speaking up, giving differing opinions was the difference between life and death. Amy Edmondson details a lot of different stories where at hospitals, nurses who spoke up or didn't speak up actually were the difference between life or death for patients. Or, for airline pilots, when the co-pilot or the navigator spoke up or didn't speak up was the difference between the plane crashing and not crashing. Now, we probably won't be in as life or death situation as that, but it absolutely makes a difference between having the best idea and a suboptimal one. All right, so let's dive a bit more deeper into this. I'm going to have a great quote here from Brené Brown, which, of course, she's pretty famous, well known. If you're not willing to fail, you can't innovate. If you're not willing to build a vulnerable culture, you can't create. It's just that simple. All right, so let's dive a bit deeper into what psychological safety looks like. And as leaders and technologists and people in our organizations, how can we produce more of this culture in our teams so that we can innovate more? So the power of psychological safety is shown when you have humility, respect, risk-taking or vulnerability, giving candid feedback, high empathy, and trust in the group. So what is humility? It basically means saying things like, hey, I don't know everything. You're better at this than I am. And especially if a manager or a leader is willing to do that, it sets the tone for everybody else, right? And one actually great way of showing humility is gratitude. I love this example from Greg Popovich, San Antonio Spurs coach, right? He basically thanks every single one of his players, and he says, thank you for letting me coach you. Now, they're paying millions of dollars, and of course, they should let him coach them, but he wants to let them know, look, I appreciate the fact that you let me influence your life. Okay, the second one here is respect. It means we value people's individuality, their experiences, and their unique skills, right? We realize that everyone has the potential to contribute in some way. There's also this idea of risk-taking or vulnerability. It means we're willing to say when we don't know something. We're willing to admit when we make a mistake. We're willing to say, hey, I'm having a hard time here, right? And the fact is, research has found that when leaders are otherwise respected or considered competent, that when they are vulnerable, it actually increases the trust and respect, does not decrease it. Now, one caveat is if you're not considered competent or respectable, being vulnerable will not actually help your case. So in that situation, don't be. But if you're otherwise considered, that actually does increase the respect and trust. One of the great examples I love is Dave Cooper. He Navy SEAL commander, and he's well known for basically helping raise up a lot of other Navy SEAL commanders. And he was famous for saying, hey, poke some holes in my ideas, right? Humility. And also, wow, I screwed that up. Humility and vulnerability, right? So great example. It doesn't mean you're not tough if you do those things. In fact, it actually means you're tougher. Brené Brown says whenever you're vulnerable, it actually takes courage to be able to do that. It's always accompanied by that trait. All right, giving candid feedback means we're willing to tell each other what we really think to help each other succeed. Empathy means we actually understand what other people are thinking and feeling, and we can respond in an appropriate way. right? When other people are excited or they're anxious or they're feeling different things, we know how to actually make it so that everyone feels like they can still talk and contribute. And finally, there's trust in the group. It means people believe that other people are out for their good. They're not there to stab them in the back. There's a sense of benevolence. That when you have these, you have the highest performing teams. This is true in technology. It's true in the Olympics. It's true for military operations. These are the things that people really try to build in so that a team can actually perform at the highest levels and also be the most innovative. Now, what is psychological safety not? It is not where everyone feels comfortable all the time. Okay, when you drive and push and go beyond what you're normally doing, it's going to feel uncomfortable, right? You ever been to the gym? And how many of us ever had a personal trainer at the gym? You ever had one? Okay, if you go to your personal trainer and you come out and you're like, that felt great, you know, I didn't sweat much and I feel really comfortable, you wasted your money, right? The fact is they should be pushing you beyond what you feel comfortable, but it's to help you perform at a higher level or be more fit or whatever it is you want to do. It is not where there's no disagreements. The highest performing teams actually have a lot of disagreement and basically arguments over ideas as they try to get to the best one. They just need to make sure it's the right kind. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And finally, it is not being nice. Okay, psychological safety does not mean suddenly we put on our nice hat and we go around giving everyone hugs, singing, you know, kumbaya while holding hands around a campfire. Okay, that is not what psychological safety is. It is clear, it is out to help people succeed, but there are times you're going to have to say things that don't feel so nice. Might be a performance conversation, might be some tough feedback, might be calling someone out on something they did that was just not helpful at all for their customers. It may not feel nice, but it is to help them and the team be able to succeed. And I love this quote from Brené Brown. She says, "Clear is kind." And so when we have a psychologically safe environment, we clearly tell people what we believe for their good. And finally, it is not lowering performance standards. Okay, remember the Google study? It is not the lowest performing teams, it was the highest performing teams that had psychological safety. So there's a bit of a myth that when you have high psychological safety, it means that you lower your expectations. But that is absolutely not true. Okay, they're on two different axes. So you can have high or low of either one. And so if you have low expectations, then you're either coasting or you're apathetic on your team. And I assume you're here at reInvent because you work at a company that is not in that basically left side, so we can get rid of that whole left side. No such thing as low expectations in your job or my job. And so we're squarely on the right side, where you have high expectations, but you can either have low psychological safety, whereas everyone's anxious, or you can have high psychological safety, where you have peak performance. And that, of course, is where we want everyone to be. So when we show respect, have empathy, have that vulnerability, we have the highest performing teams that are the most innovative. So again, ask yourselves, am I leading a team in a way where people actually experience that? If I am, great. If I'm not, could we possibly develop more of that so we can have greater creativity, innovation, and better results? Now, let me talk about conflict for just a second, because this is one of the things that people tend to shy away from, because it can devolve into something not helpful. Okay, Adam Grant has a great sort of a comparison, and he says that the kind of conflict you want a lot of on your team is task conflict. What you want to minimize is personal conflict. So task conflict means you're talking about the situation, the idea, the approach, and he found that the most successful teams have a whole lot of it, right? So if you look at it, task conflict means we have a problem. Personal conflict means you are a problem, right? Task is show me the data. The personal is I don't trust you. Task is I don't understand the thinking. The relationship is, well, that's a dumb idea, right? Not really helpful. Task is challenge the merits of the idea, whereas the personal relationship is challenge the merits of the person. And finally, task conflict, emotions might get animated. People get excited, people get, passionate, whereas personal conflict, emotions run amok. So what happens is a lot of teams shy away from any kind of conflict because they don't want the right side. But what we need to do is manage it so we have a lot of the left side, and that creates the best ideas and the most innovation. And we have a leadership principle at Amazon. We say have backbone, disagree, and then commit. Right? We want people to be able to say what they really believe, and so we expect Amazonians to do that, but we also need leaders who can create the environment so people can do that, and we can come up with the best ideas together. All right, as we round it out, there's actually this really great Stages of Psychological Safety from Tim Clark, where it says that you have the foundation of inclusion safety, where you just feel like part of the team. Then you have learner safety, where you can feel like I can learn, make mistakes, experiment. Then on top of that, you have contributor, which means, hey, I can actually make a contribution. And finally, you have challenger safety, where people feel like they can basically challenge the status quo, say things that might be unpopular because they're a little bit more creative or innovative. And so which areas do you think yield the highest performing and highest innovation teams? Right? If you guess the top two, you're right. That's the high innovation zone. So again, ask yourself, on my team, do we have contributor safety? Do we have challenger safety? Are people willing to say something that's not the popular idea to stir things up? That's actually a good sign. I was talking to a leader, and he says, my team is super psychologically safe. It's fantastic. We're super aligned all the time. I put out an idea, everyone agrees, and we just move forward, and it's really great. And I said, I really have some bad news for you. That is actually the opposite of psychological safety. I'm pretty sure that not everyone always agrees with your ideas, right? They're just not telling you. And he kind of went, oh, wow. So when we have that, that actually creates greater innovation. So what are 4 practical things that we can do to be able to create more of this psychological safety? We can acknowledge our own fallibility, especially if you're the leader, right? Be vocally self-critical is one of the things we say. You can model curiosity and ask a lot of questions, right? Learn and be curious. Hey, I'd love to hear your perspective. I'm wondering why you're thinking of that. Tell me more about that idea. We frame the work as a learning problem, not an execution problem. Okay, when you're trying to innovate and do things that have never been done before, right? It's almost always something that you're trying to figure out and you're all learning as you go. And so we call that the day one mentality, right? You're always starting, it's always the starting line, never the finish line. And then finally, promote conversational turn-taking, which means that you're seeking diverse perspectives, you're trying to get people to be able to speak. It's not just 3 or 4 people taking up all the airspace, in your team meetings, but everyone is actually able to contribute. And so teams perform at their highest levels when they feel like it's safe to voice their ideas, questions, concerns, and even mistakes. And I love this quote from Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. He wrote it in one of his shareholder letters, failure and invention are inseparable twins. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know in advance it's going to work, well, it's not an experiment. So, hopefully this has been helpful to you in some way. I'm going to take some questions now. And so if you do have some questions, please go ahead, come up to the microphone over here. And before I take those questions, though, I'd want to give you some resources that can allow you to continue forward in your growth journey. Okay, I want to ask you to start using one of these techniques. Maybe it's moving, maybe it's, spending time with friends you can laugh with, maybe it's doing some of that mindfulness, in the middle of your day or throughout your day. Perhaps it's creating more psychological safety by doing one of those things that, I talked about. But try to use one for your own personal innovation and use one for your team. The second is if you'd like to request an epic session for your company or your leadership team, talk to your AWS account manager. This is basically the launch of our external-facing sessions. We've delivered this now to about 220,000 people internally at Amazon. And we want to be able to offer this to the world at large as part of the innovation suite. So if you'd like to find out more about the emotional side of innovation, talk to your account manager, let us know. We'd be happy to look at engaging with you. And finally, we have an EQ website, eqepicleadership.com. And we also have a credible suite of innovation programs you can look at amazon.com/innovation. And we do have the QR codes that you can leverage to be able to find those websites. And one final thing is, I heard years ago that the 2 things that influence you and impact you the most are going to be the books you read and the people you know. And so if you find some high-quality books and you find some high-quality people to be around, they're going to help you be able to be the best version of yourself, right? Or reach the goals you want to reach. Here's a list of books that have made a huge impact in my life, have up-leveled my emotional intelligence and other skills, and I hope can make a difference for you as well.